Welcome to the latest edition of the Growing with God podcast. My name is Austin Fox. We have Alonna Thelen with us today on the segment. Alonna is a junior at PW, and she'll be discussing some very inspiring things today here on the podcast. She'll be talking about Steubenville and her nieces and nephews and how she is a light of Christ for those around her and setting a good example so others can see Jesus in her. Alonna, how are we doing today?
Good. How about you, Austin?
I am doing great also. Thanks for asking. So let's jump right into it. So I'm going to be honest. Dealing with the high schoolers and the middle schoolers, a lot of things get said, a lot of quotes, a lot of stories that don't necessarily resonate with me or that they get forgotten quickly. But you said something that has stuck with me. You said something the day after we got back from Steubenville. This past summer, this past June, during our testimony night in the church where we shared our experience from the Steubenville weekend. Could you just talk a little bit about what you said in the church in front of all your classmates that night and basically what that message was?
Yeah, so, gosh, I don't remember the full extent of it, but I remember talking about how I was talking with Mom on that Sunday when we got home, and I just felt like I wasn't doing enough for Christ, because you get home from that weekend and you're like, wow, everyone's just so in love with Jesus, and we talk about going to confession and going to Mass more often, and I just felt like I wasn't doing enough of that. And I tell Mom that, so then Mom tells Dad that, and then Dad comes down in the basement when I was down there, and he was like, Alonna, what do you like to do when you're with your nieces and nephews? I'm like, this is really random. I don't know, play with them, hold them, pick them up. And he's like, yeah, and do you get excited when they come over? And I was like, yeah, a little bit. And then he's like, that's just how God feels when you even look at him or say his name or think of him during the day. You don't need to do big things or go to Mass every day and confession every week. That's great, but just don't put that pressure on yourself.
That paints such a beautiful picture right there, and I think life would make a lot more sense if everybody saw Jesus that way and how he views us. When you were talking just there, a quote came to mind for me, and it's, we don't always choose God, but God always chooses us, and I think that really puts things in perspective. So you said your dad mentioned your nieces and nephews in that story. We did some quick math right before we started recording today, and we calculated that you have 12 nieces and nephews.
Yep.
How do you act as a role model for them? How do you try and make them see Jesus Christ in you when you're around them?
Yeah, I definitely try to be a role model. I hope I am all the time. But I just talk to them about, I went to Mass with Annie the other day because we were babysitting her, and it was Sunday. And when Jesus is getting consecrated, the bread's turning into his body, I'm trying to tell her okay, something big's gonna happen here. This is where Jesus turns into, or the bread turns into Jesus. She just kind of nodded at me, but at least I tried. And I just try to be positive, ask them about their friends, help them if they need any help with their problems and such. Yeah.
How old is she?
Annie?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Give or take.
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Did it feel pretty good explaining to her what was going on at the Mass?
Yeah, it did. I tried at least.
Yeah, and I'm sure that resonates with her and the other siblings and nieces and nephews that you do that for. On the flip side, who has been a light of Christ and a role model for you in the faith in your life?
One of my nieces and nephews? Or does anybody?
It could be anybody.
Oh, let's see. Definitely Mrs. Wolfert, because, had her in 6th grade. That was when we had an all-girl class, because my grade doesn't have any boys in it, practically. And that was just a really fun year, even though it got cut off. And she'd always just point out, really easy things to think of, when we're in Mass, or analogies that would help us understand things better. And then she comes to teach at the well sometimes. That's always really helpful.
We were talking right before we started recording about our Blessed Mother Mary, and sure enough, today is actually the feast of the Most Holy Name of Mary. And you mentioned how your parents have a closeness with our Mother Mary and how they pray the Rosary every day, and that you oftentimes partake in that too. What impact has praying the Rosary had on your life?
Well, when we pray the Rosary, it always just gives me such a sense of peace. We do it in the car a lot of times when we're like going to the cottage or anywhere really. And it just helps me like think about other people, because when we're praying it, I like to like, Jesus, please help this person in the car we just passed, or these people at the house we just passed. And it really puts into perspective like everyone around me.
Your parents gave a talk 2 or 3 years ago at the annual Westphalia Adult Retreat that happens every January in DeWitt, and they talked about the 7 sorrows of Mary and what she all went through during the time of Jesus' Passion, and how they frequently pray it nowadays. And it's something that has impacted me in a big way, and I think impacted everybody there, and just kind of putting in perspective the role that she plays in our lives and just how important she is, and the importance of having a closeness and a connection with her. So it's so inspiring to hear that you guys do that and that you do have that closeness already with her. Alonna, what's your favorite quote or piece of advice that someone has given you in regards to the Catholic faith?
Okay. I heard this one from a Sadie Robertson podcast called Well, That's Good. It's really good, so you should listen to it. And it's, if I was the only person that had ever lived, Jesus still would have died for me. Think about that. That's just crazy. If you were the only one on earth, Jesus still would die for you. That's how significant that is.
Again, really just puts things in perspective, doesn't it, when you look at it that way? It kind of comes back to that quote that we talked about a minute ago, is that we don't always choose God, but God always has and always will choose us. Alonna, we have a few kind of fun questions for you before we wrap up here. If you could go anywhere in the world to any faith-related place, what would it be?
Oh, it's that one church in Spain, I think. Oh, La Sagrada Familia or something. Do you know what that is?
I don't, actually.
Oh, well, Miss Butcher taught about us in school. It looked really cool because the artist, can't remember his name either, but he called himself the artist of God or something, and he didn't use any like 90-degree angles or anything that wasn't found in nature. And so all these angles are just curved on the building, and it's slightly smaller than the tallest mountain on earth, because he didn't want to make anything like bigger or more significant than God did. So that looks really cool to go to.
Sounds like it's definitely divinely inspired then.
Mm-hmm.
What, on that same note, what's the coolest place that you've already been to in your life?
Faith related?
Doesn't have to be.
I don't know. We went to Utah last summer. That was super cool. We also went to this one really random church in Ohio one time just to visit it, because it had some kind of like healings happen there. I can't remember what that's called either, but that was super beautiful.
Anytime you go to a place that has a big backstory behind it, like significant healings or anything like that, those are especially impactful as well, too, it seems like. I know a few people who went out to Medjugorje a few years ago where significant healings took place, and they said it was an absolute life-changing experience. Alonna, what is the closest that you've ever felt to God before in your life?
Ooh, that's a big question. Either at Adoration at Steubenville, probably, or even like when we went to Utah last summer, seeing the vastness and just the majesty of all like the rocks and God's creation. That is just so cool. You can sit there and just bask in the beauty of it and really appreciate how much God does for us.
You mentioned the Adoration at Steubenville this past summer. What's that experience like?
It's kind of crazy. I was nervous to go into it. I don't know. Didn't know what to expect. but you listen to a speaker before. Is there Mass that night? Do we go to Mass?
We do not go to Mass that
Oh.
night. We do the next morning and the morning of, but
Oh, yeah.
usually not that evening.
That's what I was thinking of. And then they bring the Blessed Sacrament out, and Father just goes around and the hundreds of people that are there, and it's so cool to see, like, so many people, teenagers, just worshiping God, and everyone's so happy there. It's just a really cool setting.
Is that Saturday night adoration experience at Steubenville your favorite part of that trip?
I don't know. I liked the sisters' talk this year because it was all about, like, girls and stuff, so it was really relatable.
I'm glad you brought up Steubenville because that's actually what our next question is. Did you or did you not lead the charge into the Christian music mosh pit this past year at Steubenville?
No, I don't think so. Did I?
Were you part of it?
You wanted to.
Well,
I was in it for a little bit, but...
Okay, that's yeah, apparently that's a topic for another day then. Did one of your friends lead it?
I don't know. If anybody, maybe Ella.
Sounds about right. And the last one is, could you explain to our listeners how you take 0.5 pictures on your phone the way you did on my phone this past year at Steubenville?
That was a big teaching moment for Austin. Didn't have any idea that his phone could do that.
That it was a big teaching moment indeed. That's an understatement. Alonna, I think it's safe to say that you're a light of Christ and a role model, not only for your nieces and nephews, but for your classmates, siblings, parents, and everybody around you. Keep being a light of Christ for others. It's been a lot of fun having you on today, so thank you again so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
If you guys want to hear any of our past podcasts, we list all of them in the comments section on our YouTube page, so all you have to do is click down there, and you can hear any of the past 9 episodes that we've done. We'll have another one out in just a few days, but until then, thank you all so much for listening.